round of spring outlooks. We're ready to rock and roll, and 4 SEC teams are on tap for us on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. And some teams that we look at and we're like, okay, we're finally getting into some sort of quarterback battles within these teams. A lot of good teams in the running department as well. So we're fired up. We're ready to rock and roll, and we're doing it again with our reoccurring correspondent for Pigskin Frenzy, Trent Ritchie. We're fired up. We're pumped. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean or Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage and some spring football coverage presented by us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X, Instagram, and TikTok is at pigskin_frenzy. Follow, like the pages there. You're going to get a bunch of clips and takes from the prodigy of college football on those social media platforms, as well as our website, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are joined by our reoccurring guest correspondent for Pigskin Frenzy throughout our spring outlooks, Trent Ritchie. Golf clap once again for Trent Ritchie. Trent, man, we are, kind of just going through these. I mean, this is kind of our fourth spring football episode now, but man, we got 4 SEC teams on tap that kind of are in interesting situations.
Yeah. Yep. I'm very excited to be on. I'm excited to talk about these SEC teams, man. We got a competitive conference this year.
Absolutely, man. And we're going to go down to, because we have Missouri, we have Florida, we have Tennessee, we have Auburn, teams that are, two teams that have quarterback battles within Florida and Tennessee. I wouldn't really think it's a quarterback battle within Missouri right now, even though it could be with Zollers and Simmons. But then you have Auburn, who's a certified starter going in for the Auburn quarterback room. But you got coaching changes with two schools that are trying to rebuild, especially in quarterback and offensively, but defensively could look really loaded, especially up front on defense. So let's kick it off and let's get ready to rock and roll with the Missouri Tigers going out in Como, man, Columbia, Missouri. Man, interesting season they had. I mean, they were like the number one offensive team throughout the majority of the SEC throughout, at least halfway up until November. Early November until that A&M game, it seemed like they were like the number one team offensively. They were rocking and rolling, had some good wins, played Alabama close. That was a really good one and until they lost by 3. A lot of teams for Missouri, they were a team where if you didn't come to play, right, and didn't have the right defensive game plan against them, they could get you and just get you quick, right? So up until that Vanderbilt loss, that was a loss there. That was like, okay, that's when it started to kind of fall off for them a little bit. That and A&M, and you're just like, okay, it's starting to go down a little bit for them, and including some of the injuries that they've had with Bo Pribula and some of the injuries they've had up front as well. Then when you look at, Bo Pribula coming back, you're like, okay, you get him back for the Arkansas game. They played Oklahoma, pretty well. Couldn't get it done, but you still had Pribula back, and he was, sort of getting better. I mean, they played Arkansas, beat Arkansas, and then all of a sudden they played Virginia in the bowl game, had that tough defeat against Virginia. But when you look at Missouri offensively, they were really good. Now you're looking, okay, quarterback-wise, are they going to be just as strong? You got the running game coming back with Ahmad Hardy, who, honestly, that Doak Walker Award race could have gone either way last year. You had Jamal Roberts coming back as well. Great running back room. Defensively is going to be a key there. They lost some pieces on defense, and you're going to wonder, okay, what's going to happen there? Kirby Moore, no longer the OC there. New offensive system. How's that going to work out for Missouri there? So, Trent, I'll start with you. In Missouri. Is there anything that's standing out to you for Missouri, and what are you excited to see from Missouri heading into the spring?
Yeah, so I think when you look at what Drinkwitz has been able to do in the run game especially, you anticipate a strong run game again, even with the loss of the departure of their OC, like you said. I'm going to assume that a lot of their offensive identity is coming off of Drinkwitz at the end of the day, and I think that especially when you're returning, Hardy and Roberts, I have a feeling that that probably stays the same. I mean, they combined for 11 touchdowns last year. You had a really, really productive backfield, and I assume that that stays the same, especially with the possibility of, Hardy really taking that lead role as, running back one, really solidifying himself, probably having a couple more touchdowns this year, especially with, some instability at QB. I anticipate a lot of their identity as a team is going to come off of that run game and that offense at large this year.
100%, man. Missouri is going to be a very interesting team, especially running the ball, man. Um, I think some of the things that I want to look at, because there's no spring game for Missouri this year. They're,
Yeah.
you know, nothing going on there due to the construction of their stadium. But I think the number one thing that I want to see is difference between Kirby Moore and Chip Lindsey, because Chip Lindsey was, if you remember, was the Michigan offensive coordinator last year. Now at Mizzou, how is that going to work out for them? And I'm gonna ask you that question here in a little bit again, because I want your thoughts on that as well. Number one, that's what I want to see: the system in place for Chip Lindsey. What's it going to look like offensively for them? I want to see how that's going to look. I want to see what is it going to be any different from Kirby Moore. I just want to see that. I want to see the system in place for offensively with Chip Lindsey as their new OC. That's number one as we are in spring. Now, number two, Austin Simmons, the development of Austin Simmons. I know that he was going to be their full-fledged starter last year. He struggled with an injury. He had a couple of turnovers as well. And then Trinidad Shameless, what he did last year, coming off the bench, literally that moment was like, you cannot not start Trinidad Shameless, right? So
Absolutely.
we kind of had a feeling that he was going to go elsewhere as well. So the development of Austin Simmons, how is that going to work out for him, and what's he going to look like in the spring as well? I know it's maybe a slight quarterback battle with Matt Zollers. I also want to see Matt Zollers' development as well. Even as a backup, I want to see how he's going to be even more developed also. So that's really it for me, the quarterback room, and what's that going to look like development-wise there. Defensively, who's going to step up, especially up front? You lose Damon Wilson at the edge rush position, and he goes to Miami. Who's going to step up as the edge rusher for Missouri there on the defensive front? So those are kind of the things that I want to see from, and that's my spring outlook on Missouri, honestly, and some of the things that I want to see. I mean, number one, the offensive system, how's that going to look in place with Chip Lindsey there now? Number two, the quarterback development with both quarterbacks with Zollers and Simmons. And then number three, who's going to step up at edge rusher for Missouri? Because losing somebody like Damon Wilson is going to be tough, right? I mean, especially with him going to Miami. So I want to start with you, and I know we got to move on to the other three teams, but I want to start with you on this one for sure. What is the system in your eyes going to look like under Chip Lindsey? Do you think the offense for Missouri is going to be the same, better, or is it going to be a little bit of they're regressing back?
So, it's tough to say because they had a lot of losses within their receiving room specifically. They're losing Johnson, Manning, and Madison II. It's a little bit tough because you're losing, 17 touchdowns of offensive production on your receiving core, but you're getting a lot of guys in return. I think ultimately their offense will probably live up to the expectations. They really only stumbled in a few games last year. The big emotional killer for them being that Alabama loss, that really close Alabama loss. But ultimately, I see their offense being somewhat the same as it was last year, if not better. I think that ultimately Drinkowitz leans a lot on his OCs to really, bring something schematically to the table. And I think if he has an eye for their new OC in the building, I'm going to assume that that probably stays the same. I think ultimately they're losing a lot of depth in their secondary, and their defense would be more of the concern for me, especially when it comes down to, you're losing three guys in the secondary in Pride, Norwood, and Hall. And I think that that's something that, that's tough when you're losing a lot of your secondary, especially in SEC ball. You're going to need a really prominent defense. And that's something, Mizzou hasn't even really had in the past, to be honest. But, ultimately it is going to come down to especially that quarterback battle. You bring in Austin Simons from Ole Miss. And I think that while he had some productive starts early in the year, ultimately they decided to go with Chambliss over him, and rightfully so, as that really paid off well in the end. But ultimately, it's going to come down to that quarterback room at the end of the day.
Oh, 100%. Got to keep an eye on, you mentioned the receivers, got to keep an eye on Ole Miss transfer Caden Lee now as a Missouri Tiger. So that's going to be very interesting there. He entered the portal late. decided to become a Missouri Tiger with
Yeah.
Austin Simmons at quarterback there. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Mizzou Tigers are going to bring to the table. Cannot wait to see them as a running team again because, man, Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts are lethal on the ground as a 1-2 punch tandem there. So keep an eye on them, and we will have our spring results on Missouri here in the coming weeks. I know they have no spring game, but they start their practice currently right now. So we're going to see what we give our results on them in a few weeks as they wrap up their spring soon. So that's our spring outlooks on Missouri. Another team that's very interesting and just went through a coaching change as well was the Florida Gators. And I know Florida is a team where you look at them and you're like, okay, they haven't been really at the high enough level since, the high level since 2008, but they've been trying to work at getting back into that. I won't even say 2008. I'll say in the late 2010s, they were pretty good with Dan Mullen, but they haven't been at that level, CFP, New Year's Six type level in a while. And when Billy Napier entered the fold, we thought that they were going to still be at that level. Now, while Billy Napier did have a great pieces of his coaching staff there, he had some good coaching staff. He had a good staff, some good resources there that were solid, some good pieces there that were solid. But it's just some of the stubbornness of you got to give up play calling, and he would not give up play calling to Russ Callaway. He wanted to keep and manage the play calling a little bit on offense, and that's what cost them a lot, and it ultimately cost him his job because this season it was going to be a little bit different. I mean, they had a solid end to last year that kept him his job and had a good run to the Gasparilla Bowl, beat up on Tulane, and then all of a sudden you're coming into this season kind of hot, right? And you're thinking, okay, a 1-0 start, it could be a good thing for DJ Lagway. They end up losing to South Florida, and then it all just literally just collapses, and now everyone's on Billy Napier once again. Then we get the games that we have with Miami, and as the games go on and on and on, you're like, oh man, he starts losing more, and then finally by midseason they end up letting go Billy Napier, and he is no longer the coach at Mississippi State. They let him go after the Mississippi State game, I believe. That was a close win, but they still let him go. And then all of a sudden, they tried to get into the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes. Ended up that not working out. Their next best option was John Summerall, because John Summerall was a hot candidate in the coaching carousel in 2025. And then all of a sudden, he takes the Florida job. He was going to get, a lot of people thought John Summerall was going to get to Auburn. But Florida came calling. They made him a good deal. He ended up leaving Tulane to go to the Florida Gators. And now John Summerall's the new head coach there. They had they retained a lot of their recruiting class for high school, which in the state of Florida, that's a pivotal point, Trent. You need to be able to recruit high school in Florida. Yeah. Now, also, the portal. They did okay. I would think they did pretty well in the portal. I wouldn't say they were a, number one LSU type class, immediate impact class like LSU was, but they did pretty decent in the portal and got some good key players in there coming in. They get Buster Faulkner at the offensive coordinator position there. Defensively, I think defensively they should be all right as well. I mean, bringing in a lot of key talent back on defense and a lot of key talent back at the receiver position like you talked about off air. So, question for you, honestly. Number one, what are you looking forward to for the spring for Florida? Do you like anything that you're seeing from Florida as they're officially started spring practices March 3rd? Their spring game is on April 11th. Do you like what you're seeing from Florida? And if so, throughout the rest of the spring, what do you want to see from them?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to not like about Florida this year, especially coming in with all your returning production. You get Jaden Baugh back, you get Dallas Wilson, you get Vernon Brown the third back in the building. And I think those kind of, returns are really, really important if you're a new coach like John Summerall. But I think ultimately what I like about them the most is John Summerall. I see potential for a guy who's really good on his fundamentals. He's really, really been a motivator and a guy that really appeals well to his players. And I think ultimately that's something you need in the building if you're the Florida Gators, who had a lot of trouble with that under Billy Napier. I think Billy Napier really lost sight of the ball, especially, midway through a lot of those seasons where they're really looking at, middling 500. They're not competing. They're not quite reaching the level that the boosters were really looking for out of Napier, especially coming from the Saban coaching tree. You saw a lot of potential there, but he really was just not reaching those heights that they were looking for out of him. And I think ultimately, when you see John Summerall bring a really under-equipped team like Tulane into the playoffs last year, and it showed, especially in that game versus Ole Miss, but, really dominated North Texas in that AAC championship game. You're having a lot of thoughts about, okay, well, if we're able to retain the kind of talent that Napier brought into the building, maybe another voice will add some motivation to this group. And I think that is what you're going to get. Along with that, he brings in a lot of good transfers. You get Eric Singleton Jr., out of Auburn. That adds to that receiving core that's already really, really star-studded. But, at the same time, I think I've got some reservations about the QB room. They're kind of floating Philo as the starter right now. And I just think with the kind of weapons you have in the backfield and on the outside, that's going to be an area of concern for me right now. But I'm willing to be proven wrong on that. I'm willing to really see what he's got in his back pocket. But I'm wondering, you brought in all these guys. Summerall really seems set on not bringing back Lagway. He really seemed like he was not interested in a reunion with him and ultimately decides to air with Philo. But you know what? I think especially when you're bringing in these kind of guys on the offensive side of the ball, in Florida, the defense seems to really fall into place. And I think that that's something we're probably going to see under Summerall.
100%, man. Man, I am curious about the quarterback room. I think that's really kind of like we're piggybacking off of each other there. That's really my number one pickup there, and my number one point for my spring outlook on Florida is number one. What's the quarterback room going to look like? I mean, I know Tramel Jones Jr. is the redshirt freshman there. He will most likely be in the battle with Aaron Philo coming in from Georgia Tech. I think Aaron Philo is the leading guy to start because of the system in place there with Buster Faulkner being the offensive coordinator. What's that going to look like? How's the development of Aaron Philo going to look? And Tramel Jones, what's the quarterback situation going to look like? Kind of like what I said about Missouri, the development of the quarterback room. What's that going to look like under Florida? Number two, what's the defensive system going to look like? Brad White coming in from Kentucky, defensive coordinator there, considered a high-scale move, really. I mean, he's produced top 25 defenses at Kentucky before. So what's that going to look like under Florida? Will the defense be even more revamped, be more physical and aggressive? What's that going to look like? The defense going to look like under Brad White there at Florida. So what's that system going to look like in place? That's number two for me. And then number three, finally, the mentality, and is the players going to be bought in the spring heading into the fall, really? Like John Summerall taking over his leadership. I know he's a really good football coach, and he's a really good players coach. A lot of people want to play for John Summerall. What's that going to look like at Florida, and how is he going to utilize? How is his culture and style of coaching going to blend in, and how are they going to mentally buy into his style of coaching in the spring? So, I just wanted to see, like, mentally where they're going to be at with the change of leadership, and how's the culture going to take effect in the spring as well. So those are my 3 points that I really wanted to see from Florida, honestly. Number one, the quarterback room, the development there. Number two, what's the defense going to look like under Brad White, and how his system's going to be in place there during the spring. And then number three, overall, as a coaching and cultural fit there, how is it going to blend in and kind of just mesh well with Florida overall? So those are really my 3 spring outlook points for them. They have spring practices have already started for them. Their spring game really is April 11th, 2 Eastern, 1 Central, I believe. On Saturday, April 11th. But before we move on, so I know you said can quarterbacks are your biggest concern for Florida. Yeah. Is there anything else that really stands out to you? Like besides the quarterbacks being a concern, is there anything that's of concern for Florida besides the quarterback rooms?
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, with every SEC team, it's going to be your schedule, especially early on. You play at Auburn and then you're going to Ole Miss. That is a really tough, 2-game stretch at the very beginning of the season. You're going to be competing against another coach, new into the building, and Alex Golesh, who we'll talk about later. But I think then you've got, at Texas, and then you've obviously got your Florida-Georgia rivalry. I think that's that's a really tough 2-game stretch again towards the end of the year. And I'm wondering, especially with John Summerall being new in the building and there being a lot of questions at quarterback. Well, I think John Summerall will certainly work in Florida. I think when you're bringing in some fresh new faces at quarterback in a really, really tough SEC where you have a lot of returning talent, Gunnar Stockton, Arch Manning, you're really going to need some production out of that QB spot, especially when you've got a star-studded receiving core, even with losing, Eugene Wilson III to Texas. I think that's LSU. That is a really, really big deal at the end of the day. And I think you're really going to need, either, Philo or whoever they decide to go with to show up at that QB spot. And that would still, even looking at their schedule, ultimately be the biggest deciding factor in those games.
Yeah, and they don't have any problems in the running game either with Jaden Bond coming back. So that's going to be a huge, get back for them as well.
Huge get for them. Yeah.
I mean, we are pumped to see what Florida's going to do during the during spring. They started their spring practices already. Their spring game will be on Saturday, April 11th. That was our spring outlook on them. We're going to see. We're going to give our spring results on them within the next few weeks. Cannot wait to see what the Florida Gators bring to the table during the spring. 2 more left. We're already time's flying by, man. There's 2 more left. We got Tennessee to talk about now, man. A team that also has, what's going on with the quarterback position as well. I mean, we had last year start off the season good offensively with Joey Aguilar coming in, transferring in, and they blew out Syracuse in their opening game, and they did really well against Georgia in week 3, and you're looking like, oh, man, well, what a game of the year, right? Like a game of the year there between, Georgia and Tennessee there. So you look at that and you're like, okay, they lost by the hair of their chinny chin chin, but they keep on going, they keep on persevering. You see a little bit of some problems, a little bit defensively, and you're like, okay, what's going on defensively? They're giving up a chunk of yards, but offensively with Joey Aguilar, they're still, maybe not phenomenal, but they're still scoring points and still finding a way to win ball games. Then they start adding some losses in there like Bama, and they're in kind of a do or die mentality with Oklahoma at this point. They had 2 losses at that point. They lose another game to OU, and they're officially out after that. And you're wondering Heupel always has a down year after making the playoff or having a good 11-win year. He always has another down year. What's going to happen going into the next season? Which will be a question I'm about to ask here in a little bit. Tennessee to me, and then they wrap up their season with Illinois, and they've lost Illinois. But Tennessee for me, I thought they were going to have the season in 2025 that I expected them to have. Let me just put it that way. I expected them to have a 3 to 4 loss year. I didn't expect it to be a playoff caliber team. But I didn't expect them to be a bad team overall. I expected them to be a good team, just not a, playoff caliber type team like they were the year prior. So now, big thing is they were trying to get Joey Aguilar back. Now he loses the injunction and he's going off to the NFL. He will not get another year of eligibility. Now it's between Faison Brandon and George McIntyre and Ryan Staub from Colorado, the transfer from Colorado. So I'll start with you as we head in for Tennessee during the spring because they start theirs on Tuesday, a Pigskin Frenzy Day, which is great, St. Patrick's Day. They start their practice on Tuesday, and they have their spring game on April 11th. What are you looking forward to seeing from them this spring, and is there anything that stands out to you about Tennessee?
Yeah. So I think the big name for me would be Chaz Coleman for sure. You're bringing in, the number 4 edge rusher out of the portal. He was great at Penn State. He really had, some limited action. I think there were some injuries in there, if I'm not correct. But, he had 12 pressures, 3 tackles for a loss. He had a strip sack on the season. He was a really productive guy off that edge. And ultimately, you are going to need that in a really loaded SEC if you're Tennessee. I think the way they ended the season last year, in I believe the Music City Bowl against Illinois, it was a really tough loss. That's something you're not expecting if you're Tennessee, especially going into a game against what was considered sort of a mid-tier Big Ten team. I think if you're Tennessee, you were expecting to end that season a little stronger, and rightfully so. However, I think ultimately at the end of the day, this is a big season for Josh Heupel. I think there's been a lot of questions about his turnover on the offense, especially losing guys like Imev and Squirrel White earlier in last year. I think you see a lot of areas where his offense doesn't seem to be translating players to the pros, and that's maybe more of a minor view on it, maybe a little lesser on him as a coach, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think this is something that boosters look at and see as a big deal when you're analyzing his side of the ball specifically. But ultimately, the defenses have been known for giving up big yardage in big games, and I think seeing a guy like Chaz Coleman come into the building could really change that for them. And I think those being my two main points. However, their running back room is incredibly strong again this year. They're bringing back Deshaun Bishop. I think that's a big, retainment for them. I think that's a big guy coming back into the building. That's a really powerful voice, especially coming off of a bit of an underwhelming year last year. I think I see a lot of potential with this team, especially if they're really looking to make a push back into the playoffs. But ultimately, I think this is a make or break year for Josh Heupel.
Man, my drop on that one. My drop. Yeah, a lot of people were complaining about Josh Heupel after the end of that Oklahoma game and after the end of the season.
Yeah.
They were just saying, is he really the guy there? I mean, he's produced really good seasons for them so far. So, I mean, I would still keep Josh Heupel around, honestly. I mean, he's done remarkable things for them. But that's just my honest thoughts on that. But I will admit it could be a little bit of a pressurized thing because of, okay, we want to see another playoff run and probably a deeper playoff run from you than what we're getting out of. So it really just starts really with honestly, the quarterback battle. I mean, what's the quarterback competition going to look like? Who's going to take that next edge there? That's number one for me. Is it going to be George McIntyre, redshirt freshman, true freshman, Faison Brandon, or is it going to be the Colorado transfer and Ryan Staub? Is that going to be it? What's going to happen there? Who knows?
No.
Who knows? You're shaking your head no. So before I go on to number 2 and 3, what's happening? Like, why are you shaking your head no?
Okay, they're not going to start Stobbs, realistically. After what you saw out of him last season, I think he is more of a veteran voice in that quarterback room, especially with young guys. You got a redshirt freshman in George McIntyre and a brand new 5-star in Faison Brandon. I wonder, however, if they're going to lean with Brandon midway through the year if McIntyre kind of struggles a little bit, especially because his snap count isn't very high. You had Aguilar, and then you obviously had Imev the first year. So I'm kind of wondering, bringing in all these new faces into a quarterback room, who's going to really stand out, because you're going to need someone with this SEC schedule, especially when you're playing a really tough preseason as well. You're at Georgia Tech week 2. I think that is a massive deal for them, and ultimately, when you have Texas A&M and LSU back-to-back at the end of the year, you're really going to be looking for a strong leadership voice from the quarterback room.
Oh, 100%. I got you, man. And you're right. So it's going to come down between mainly, I would think, George McIntyre and Faison Brandon.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there in the quarterback battle. And then number 2 for me would be obviously defense. What is Jim Knowles' system going to look like implemented in Tennessee and in Rocky Top, right? I want to see what that defense is going to look like. I want to see if they're going to be more physical than when Tim Banks was their DC. I know last year, the year prior, it was wonderful in 2024. And then it was physical, tough, and then 2025, it just a big fell off, I guess, right? What happened? That's what everyone was asking. So they let him go. They get Jim Knowles in. What's going to happen with that? And that's what we're kind of curious about in the spring. Like, how physical is their defense going to be, and what's his system going to look like implemented down in Rocky Top? Then number 3, who's going to step up the receiving core? I think you lose Chris Brazel as well. I know you get guys coming in at the receiving core, freshmen like Lane Cope, Jacoby Cooper, guys who were signed as true freshmen into Tennessee. Are they going to step up? Are we going to see somebody else? What's the depth of the receiving core looking like in the spring, and who's going to branch out in the spring? So those are really just my 3 for Tennessee and what I kind of want to see from them. I know their spring practice starts on Tuesday on St. Patrick's Day. They have their spring game on April 11th, and we're going to do spring results on them in a couple of weeks. But before we wrap up on Tennessee, I do want to ask you about, I know you're high on Chaz Coleman, Jim Knowles. Like, what do you think about that hire as the DC for Tennessee?
I think ultimately he needs to really highlight his edge rushers and his personnel that he has gotten fresh from the portal this year. I think ultimately that is where you saw success under the previous DC, especially when you had James Pierce, coming off the edge. That was a big guy for them. I believe he had 10 sacks on the season the year they went to the playoffs. It was a big deal. He was even playing, partial snaps. It wasn't even really, had a lot of off the field issues. I think Chaz Coleman's going to be a guy that's going to avoid a lot of those. And I think ultimately, if you're Jim Knowles, you need to make up for the lost time that you have had under, I believe he was at Penn State, yes?
Yeah, Penn State.
Yep. Yep. And I think ultimately you need to return back to the days when you were at Clemson. And I think that while he's definitely has a good background, he's really, really a smart guy. He needs to make sure that he is embracing his players, especially off of the edges and the defensive line, and really look to make sure that he is covering up for somewhat, in my eyes, of a weak secondary, especially losing a lot of guys to the portal this year. I think that that's something that Jim Knowles is going to really need to look out for.
100%, man. Tennessee has their spring game on April 11th, and we will get to them in a few weeks and give our spring results and our grades on them within the next few weeks for Tennessee. That was Missouri, Florida, and Tennessee. Let's wrap it up and go with one more interesting one, and a lot of people were clamoring for a new head coach, and they got it down in Auburn, Alabama with the Auburn Tigers. So very interesting. They started off the season. Hugh Freeze was kind of walking a fine line there down in Auburn, and everyone was sitting there and going, okay. I mean, look, Jackson Arnold, their quarterback, they bring him in. A lot of people were saying out of all the guys you would have gotten in the portal, you decided to go get Jackson Arnold, but that was his decision, coaching decision by him. They get Ashton Daniels. They had Deuce Knight as to round up the quarterback room. All of a sudden, they beat Baylor, and once they beat Baylor to open up the season, everyone's like, okay, yay. I mean, they look solid. I mean, offensively, but what's going to happen defensively? And then the cracks started happening around the Oklahoma game. Offensively, they didn't all the defense kind of got to them. Defensively, they got a little bit better, especially in the secondary, got a little bit better defensively. But offensively, they did put up some points, but they just really quarterback play was just not a big thing for them. And Cam Coleman was still catching footballs, man. He was still catching footballs from any guy. That just goes to show how good he is at wide receiver and how elite he is as a wide receiver. But quarterback play was not a strength for them at all at Auburn. And it honestly cost them some games. And coaching-wise, offensively, Hugh Freeze just couldn't get it down and under control for Auburn. He was let go. And DJ Durkin took over around the Vanderbilt game, Week 11, for Hugh Freeze. Took over he was the interim bump. There we go. And they came very close by the hair of their chinny chin chin, beating Vanderbilt in Nashville. Didn't work out for them. And then they ended up playing, I believe, Mercer close, or not close. They blew out Mercer. Then they played Alabama. It was a win or go home, or nothing to lose mentality for Auburn, do or die for Alabama in that Iron Bowl, and they brought it. They brought it to that game. Very close Iron Bowl. Alabama ended up winning, and that was their season. But the scramble was, okay, was John Summerall going to Florida there, or what's going to happen there? Because John Summerall, right, that they were looking in a deal with him, but they were trying to get John Summerall. They were out on John Summerall after he went to Florida, and it's like, dang it, we can't, who are we going to get now? Is it going to be DJ Durkin? Then lo and behold, we all wake up Sunday morning and we can hear the news. Alex Golesh is the new head coach at Auburn from South Florida. And you're sitting there like, whoa, like that's a name that, because we all thought he was going to go to Arkansas, but that was a name that we didn't see coming for Auburn at all. Very interesting hire, decent hire. He keeps DJ Durkin as the DC there. I believe, I believe that he will still call the plays, but Derek Nix, the offensive coordinator, is still there for Auburn, so they keep Derek Nix there, but I would believe that they're going to kind of swap some play calling there, and Alex Golesh is going to call some of the plays like he did at South Florida, but you get rid of the quarterbacks, interim Byron Brown, transferring from South Florida, going in at Auburn, running back room with Jeremiah Cobb, Davenport coming in from South Florida as well. You get those guys in there. I know Eric Singleton leaves, but you still get some studs at receiver helping them out. Even though they did, Cam Coleman left as well, which was kind of a huge blow for them. But you look at them and you're like, okay, they had a mass exodus in the portal, but you look also and you're thinking this team may be a team that's underrated and flying under the radar heading into this season. So, Trent, what are you looking forward to seeing from Auburn during the spring, and what stands out to you about the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, so what would stand out to me the most, obviously, is Alex Golesh. I mean, been a big fan of his. Was on the USF train 1 year early. Was really big on them in 24. And I think that seeing him come in is going to be interesting for them, especially with what Hugh Freeze was bringing to the building. Whole lot of golf, not a whole lot of competitive games for them. And I think that ultimately they are looking to bring a new voice into the building, and a very good one at that. I think if you look at last year and you see that ultimately the Iron Bowl came down to, an unfortunate drop or a fumble, from Cam Coleman, kind of sealed the game for them. They were really driving downfield, even with Ashton Daniels in the backfield. I think ultimately what you're doing is you're trading a really star-studded receiver core. You're losing Singleton, you're losing Coleman, for a much steadier hand at QB and Byron Brown, and you're really getting a more aggressive play caller from Alex Golesh. And I'm excited to see that unfold, especially with the pass that USF has had. I mean, winning in Gainesville week 2 and really giving Alabama trouble the previous year. I think that there is a chance that Alex Golesh is the guy that can win the big games for them. And ultimately, they have one game circled on their schedule, and that is Alabama. They need a big win, and if they are really doing well throughout the season, their schedule looks really, really tough on its face, but I think there's some winnable games there. You're at Tennessee, you're at home for Vanderbilt, you're at home against Florida. I see some very winnable games early on for them, and I think ultimately it is going to come down to how do they look against Bama, especially when you had DJ Durkin in that interim role last year, who did a really fantastic job rallying the defense after a really tough loss to Vanderbilt. I think you see potential there, and I think ultimately it's going to come down to how Alex Golesh shines in Power 4.
Oh, 100%, man. It's going to be very interesting for Auburn.
Yeah.
They start their practices on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. They have their spring game on April 18th at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 Eastern on April 18th. So curious because Alex Golesh, that's kind of like we're piggybacking off of each other again here, Trent. That's my number one thing, man. I really want to see how leadership-wise Auburn's going to look under Alex Golesh. His coaching culture, his mentality, how is that going to take shape in the spring, and how is everybody going to be locked in and bought in to him under his regime and coaching regime. So that's number one for me for Alex Golesh. Number 2 is the offensive line. I mean, you got guys like Ty Buster there, Ty Buster there, competing for solidified starting positions at the offensive line. I do want to see who else besides him is going to take the reins around the offensive line and in up front, and just to protect Byron Brown and protect guys like Jeremiah Cobb and Davenport coming in from South Florida. So the key thing is to me is the offensive line and how they're going to be and retooled in the spring. So that's number 2 for me. I would think number 3, honestly, would be the receiving core. I mean, they do have some talent, but losing Cam Coleman, losing Eric Singleton, how is that going to take effect, for them? And who's going to step up big at receiver for Auburn? They also, Malcolm Jenkins they lost Malcolm Jenkins too. He went to Texas Tech for Sorsby. Yeah. So it's like, how is Auburn wide receiver wise going to look for them? I mean, they lose commitments as well, like Jace Matthews. He was coming back. So Jace Matthews is going to Auburn. It was a big talk about if he was going to be going to Ole Miss or not, but he ends up going to Auburn. So that's a big one there. You get Devin Carter coming in, Brian Williams Jr. as well. So you got some freshman guys in there, but they're all really just freshman top talent. How is the receiving core going to look after the departures of a Coleman, a Jenkins, and then Singleton as well. So what's that going to look like for Auburn? So those are really my three things for Auburn as we head into the spring. Is there any really concerns for you about Auburn heading into the spring and heading into the fall in general?
Ultimately, I would have to, go right back at you and just say the receiving core, to be honest with you. They're bringing in Christian Neptune out of USF, so I'm kind of, they've got some cohesion there, but ultimately, I do think a lot of their scheme is going to be power running, especially from the quarterback position. Byron Brown, known for using his legs, known for being a very aggressive runner. I think that ultimately they're going to have to really hone in the run game. Even in my notes, run baby run. I think that that is ultimately going to have to be their message going into the season is really, put your head down, be physical, embrace the offensive line, embrace some physicality, especially with Golesh coming into the building and bringing that type of voice from USF. I think if you're really going to keep to your DNA and really keep to that running and really keep to, the decision making that you're getting from Byron Brown, I think that the USF cohesion from all the teams and from all the people that you're getting from USF is going to really come into the fold well. And I think that towards the end of the season, you could really use some of the chemistry from those years at USF. And I think if he is able, to really bring that all together, especially when you're bringing back DJ Durkin on the defensive side of the ball, I think he's mostly got that. I think your defense is going to be returning a lot of talent. It's going to be returning a lot of key guys and a lot of key, schematics. And especially when it comes to someone like DJ Durkin, who has a lot of experience in this league, I think they're really going to need an eye-popping offense, especially when it comes down to the run game. And I do see that happening for them. But you know what? They're going to have to work with a receiving core that's going to be a little bit understaffed compared to what they had last year. But I think that they can make it work. And I think with Alex Golesh bringing that physicality into the building, I see a lot of potential for them.
100%, man. I know because you got Byron Brown, that's going to be a good quarterback power, just running the rock through everybody. Like you said, run baby run, man. So and you mix it in with Jeremiah Cobb and Davenport, right? So that's good. My question to you is, do you think Auburn will win games that they're not expected to win? Because I do.
I think early on, yes. There are some games down the stretch. I think the big one for me would be Alabama, which would be really quite, DeBoer would have to get some explaining done, especially, with the way they kind of really squeaked it out last year against a really understaffed Auburn team and a really, undermotivated Auburn team, especially with, the kind of production they were getting out of the quarterback spot. I think ultimately your winnable games on the schedule, I think you're going to lose Georgia. I think you're going to lose LSU. I think you're going to lose Ole Miss. That's 3 back to back to back. But ultimately, I see your winnable games as Florida, Vanderbilt, and possibly Bama at the end of the year. I think if you're able to scrape those 3 and, finish out at around an 8-4 season, I think you could really, really see a pivotal stepping stone for Alex Golesh in his first year. And I can see some real potential coming out of there, especially if they are looking to get back to their former glory and make a playoff run in 27-28.
Yeah, and it would be a huge trajectory for Golesh and in the step of the Auburn program. You're going at the right direction. So
absolutely.
Absolutely, man. So April 18th is their spring game. We're going to see and give our spring results on Auburn within the next few weeks. They start their practices on Tuesday for St. Patrick's Day. We are super excited about that. That is really all of our spring outlooks for each and every one of them. Like we did the past few episodes, we're probably just going to keep doing it just to conclude and wrap it up. Most concerned about and least concerned about out of the 4 we just talked about.
Well, I would say most concerned about definitely Florida. I think that their questions in the quarterback room are going to greatly outweigh any of the continuity and really, I just definitely still have some questions about that QB room. I think the players are really going to want to play for Summerall, though, and I think that's definitely a plus for them. I think those players are really going to like him quite a bit, especially seeing his success at Tulane and even playing him a year back. Many of them did. I think that they're going to see a guy who's really devoted to football, committed to his ideals of really, really physical football, which will translate well into the SEC. But I do think that their questions at quarterback are going to eventually, bite them, especially when, looking at their schedule. They've got some really, really tough games in there. I do think they lose that Auburn game week 3. I think that's probably the biggest one for me to keep an eye on in terms of them. However, when it comes to, you know, someone I think can really outperform expectations, I would definitely refer back to Auburn. I just think there's a lot of potential there. I think the kind of cohesion you're going to have from the previous Golesh years in USF is going to be a really important thing to see out of them. And I just get a feeling that, DeBoer has been really trying to escape the shadow of Saban. He's really been trying to escape these massive expectations that he's had on him, especially after ending this year in such a brutal way with that loss to Indiana. I think that Golesh is going to get the best of him, and I think that DJ Durkin is going to show out and prove that he too belongs as the Auburn defensive coordinator and is going to be ultimately probably the best move out of Golesh from his initial hiring.
I think the least concern for me, the least concern is with you. I'm with Auburn. Like, I'm not really concerned about Auburn that much. Like, because I think Auburn's going to overachieve. I really do. I mean, I'll be surprised if they underachieve their first year. I think Golesh is going to come out hard and coach really hard. I know the questions are at offensive line and wide receiver, which are big. Those are pretty big questions. But if they can get it figured out in the spring, they could be a fun team to watch out for heading into the fall. So for me, I would say Auburn, and then the most concerned, I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think the defensively they're going to be solid. I think Jim Knowles, good hire there, going to be physical. But I think that the concern to me is just the unknown at quarterback for Tennessee. I just don't know quarterback-wise what's going to happen for them. I know you mentioned it about Florida, but at least they have more of a guy that Aaron Philo played a little bit more at Florida, at Georgia Tech. You didn't even see a lot of these guys at Tennessee last year with George McIntyre, and so it's like it's just kind of unknown for me with Tennessee right now in the quarterback spot. So I get they have a good running game going, but quarterback-wise is just a little bit of a concern right now. So I'm concerned a little bit more about Tennessee out of these group of 4 teams. So Trent, man, it is always just fun to have you on doing our spring outlooks where we're pumped, and we're pumped. We're out of time, I know, but we're pumped, and the time just flies by. So, guys, we're super pumped. Thank you for tuning in each and every Tuesday and Thursday, and we're just to sit down and listen to just talk about college football. Listen to us talk about college football and spring football presented by us. If you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on here as well, and follow on there as well, guys. X, Instagram, and TikTok is at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow all the pages there. You're going to get wild takes from the college football prodigy, and you're going to get a lot of episode updates for Pigskin Frenzy as well. The website is www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. We are super fired up and thankful for you guys tuning in each and every week. Because without you guys, we would not be doing this show. We wouldn't be here without you guys. So we're so thankful each and every week for you guys tuning in and listening. Because it's a we show. If you want spring outlooks, we're going to give you spring outlooks, guys. So we're so thankful for you guys, and we're pumped that you listen to us each and every week. And we're so thankful, most importantly, for our Lord and Savior Jesus, because without him, we would not be in college football media. We would not be here in doing Pigskin Frenzy, because without him, and we would just not be doing this overall. So we're grateful. We give him all the glory and all the praise, and we're going to continue to give him all the glory and all the praise each and every show and other shows that we get on as well. He is good, and we are so thankful for him. Coming up on Tuesday, the only really episode that we're missing Trent on, we have the group of 6. We have the group of 6 coming on. So we have a group of 6 episode. We do it each spring. At least one group of 6 episode happening. We got Boise State. We got UNLV. We have South Florida. South Florida is going to be a very interesting team this year as well. And a new team has joined the ranks in the FBS in the Mountain West, North Dakota State. We're going to talk about those 4 schools on Tuesday. And then next Thursday, Trent will return, and we got all 4 SEC teams back on tap with Georgia, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Going to be very interesting when he returns next Thursday. So on Tuesday,
The
yeah, exactly. Group of 6 on Tuesday. More SEC next Thursday when Trent comes back. Guys, until Tuesday, have a great weekend. I'm Joel Norris. That's reoccurring guest correspondent for Pigskin Frenzy, Trent Ritchie. We're both signing off. Until Tuesday, as always, we're praying for you all. We love you all. Stay the course.